So at the beginning of this year, I did something pretty absurd. I tried 16 different Spotify promotion companies and I made a video and a blog post about all of the results. And probably a lot of you have watched that. If you haven't, I will put a link to go check that video out. But for a while, I've had it on the docket to do like standalone breakdowns of some of the campaigns. So in this video, that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to break down my results with YouGrow Promo. It's kind of funny. I've been planning to put this out for a little while, and then I saw that Andrew Southworth did a video on YouGrow, and I was like, oh man, now it'll just be redundant. But then I thought to myself, hey, it'll be helpful for people to have multiple data points to see more about what's up. And I also think you'll find the results kind of interesting because this is 7 months after I ran that campaign. I ran the campaign in the beginning of March, and it is now October. So we've had 7 months for the data to come in, and I think that just tells like a fuller story. So without further ado, I will get into the results and we will flip around to the computer here. Here's what happened with YouGrow Promo. All right, so we're here at the computer. I put together a very impressive PowerPoint and that'll walk you through the results of this YouGrow promo campaign. First of all, the cost. I paid $247 for this. For a lot of the campaigns I ran at the beginning of this year, I actually did not pay money. They gave me free trials. YouGrow, I did pay. So I paid $247 like a normal customer. They treated this, as far as I know, like a normal campaign. The song was a track called Trouble on My Mind by the artist Lou Apollo. It's a pop track. It has some elements of soul, R&B, blues, rock, and yeah, I think it could be placed in a lot of different genres, but definitely it's primarily a pop track. And in my opinion, it's well produced, well written, the sort of thing that probably should be able to get some good traction on playlists. So YouGrow was able to get us placement on 2 playlists: Whiskey Blues, this playlist, and then Indie Rock Hits by Oceanify. I've seen these guys actually in a few different playlisting campaigns. But both of these lists are clearly pretty big. So both over 100,000 likes, followers. One of them is over 150,000 likes. So if you're on one of these playlists and they're legit playlists, you're going to see streams coming in. Like it's just enough volume that you'll see some results. So I actually pulled up both these playlists in Spotify and I will show you what they look like in Artist Tools, which is kind of like a playlist checking software. So here's Indie Rock Hits, and the main thing I always look at is the follower growth curve. Like, are there any sudden dips that would show accounts getting removed? That would be a sign of bots. No, it's a pretty clear upward growth curve. That looks pretty good. Artist Tools, for what it's worth, says they're authentic. I always take that with a grain of salt. You never know. But from what we can tell, they look like a decent playlist. And then pretty similar story for Blues and Whiskey. If you just go and look at their long-term growth curve, they've just always been running upward at a pretty good rate. So no spikes, no sudden dips. Probably both of these playlists are just having ads run to them constantly, is my guess. And then here is what the song looks like in Spotify for artists. So you can see all time we are at 76,000, 77,000 streams since it was released in February. And then if we go to the last 12 months, you can really get a sense of what happened. So here's where the playlist kicked in. Right there. Can you guess it? And you can see the songs were basically on these playlists for a while to varying degrees, and then eventually they were finally kind of taken off around this point. But you can also tell that even though there was this initial spike and there's this longer term 3 month spike while they were still on the lists, eventually when they were taken off, the song gets right back down to around where it was or even a little bit below, which makes sense. I mean, this is now 7 months after it was released, so you would expect it to have trailed off. But basically, there was not this lasting like new level after these playlists after the song was taken off. In terms of engagement, things look okay. We have like a little over 6% save rate. That's not bad for a playlisting campaign. And we have a 1.675 streams per listener. Also not bad. It's definitely not high. If you're running ads, you should be above 2 for sure. But it's also not awful for a playlisting campaign. And playlisting campaigns are going to give you less engaged streams because you're on a playlist with a ton of other songs. So people are just going through that playlist, maybe while they're working out, maybe while I guess they're sipping whiskey on this playlist. But you're not going to get a super high rate of engagement when you're on a playlist. What you're paying for is a high volume of cost efficient streams. And if you go to the playlist section for this song and you set it to since 2015, you can see that most of the streams came from this blues and whiskey playlist, 19,000. and then 3,000 came from this indie rock hits. There are obviously also a bunch of playlists that are third-party playlists that we didn't necessarily pitch. That often happens when you get on these big playlists. You'll also get added to these ancillary playlists. YouGrow is not claiming responsibility for that, but that's just part of being in this ecosystem where you're added to these big playlists. You'll often get a lot of these other smaller playlists because they're watching the big playlists. You'll also see that the song got some radio play, but not a ton, and there really isn't that much other algorithmic growth, a little bit of release radar, and it actually did get a tiny smidge of Discover Weekly, but it's not something that's like driving many streams, obviously. So those are the results. In total, YouGrow claims responsibility for 22,461 streams, with most of those coming from the Blues and Whiskey playlist. And then if you break it down, that's about 91 streams per dollar, and it's about 1 cent per stream. Think about that in your head for a second, because I know it always takes me like a minute to figure out what that actually means, but those were the results. All right, so those are the numbers. I think the takeaways from this: number one, playlisting is definitely a cost-efficient way to drive streams. There's no denying that. Number two, playlisting is almost always a short-term result, so it's great in conjunction with other things, but if you're just using playlisting, you're almost always going to see a return to baseline after you're off the playlists, even if it's a longer tail. Personally, I do think that playlisting works. I do think that YouGrow does an above-board job with it. Basically, I'm just saying that they're legit. But even so, I wouldn't use playlisting as a primary tool. I would use it in conjunction with something like ads or something where you know you're going to get high engagement, so you won't just have the low engagement streams from playlisting. If you're interested in seeing more playlisting campaigns, again, I did that whole 16 campaign video at the beginning of this year. And if you want to hear about other tactics, check out this video I just did with Todd McCarthy, who is a former VP at Sony Music, and he talks through some of his favorite methods of marketing. So I hope it's helpful, and whether you get a billion streams or not, here's wishing you good luck, as always, as you market your music.